The unexpected collision Marcus Webb sank deeper into the shimmering quantum pool and decided that bankruptcy might actually be worth it. The water, if you could call the luminescent liquid that seemed to exist in 3 dimensions, simultaneously, water, wrapped around his body like liquid starlight. Each droplet hummed with energy that made his skin tingle and his chronic back pain from years hunched over laboratory equipment simply disappear. 43,000 credits for 2 weeks at Nebula Springs Resort. Money he absolutely couldn't afford after losing his job at the quantum research facility. Money that represented his entire severance package, his emergency fund, and a significant chunk of his retirement savings. But as the interdimensional healing waters worked their magic on muscles that had been knotted with stress for 8 months, Marcus couldn't bring himself to care about his financial ruin. Luxury beyond the boundaries of known physics, he muttered, quoting the brochure that had seduced him into this spectacular act of fiscal irresponsibility. The marketing materials had promised therapeutic immersion in quantum-stabilized waters that exist across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, providing healing that transcends the limitations of single-reality medicine. So far, the experience was living up to the impossible hype. The pool itself defied several laws of physics that Marcus had spent his career studying. The water appeared to be simultaneously liquid, gas, and something that might have been pure energy. Strange geometric patterns shifted beneath the surface, and occasionally he caught glimpses of what looked like other versions of the pool existing in parallel dimensions, visible through the quantum overlay like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself float, feeling lighter than he had since the morning his department head had called him into that sterile conference room to explain that budget cuts meant his position was being restructured. Restructured, such a polite word for your life's work, is now considered expendable. The quantum pool pulsed with a gentle rhythm that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. For the first time since losing his job, since watching his research disappear into classified folders, since his ex-fiancée had decided she couldn't handle dating someone with no clear career trajectory, Marcus felt something approaching: peace. The water beside him suddenly erupted in a cascade of shimmering droplets that seemed to hang in the air like suspended diamonds before gravity remembered its job. Marcus jerked upright, his moment of zen thoroughly shattered, and found himself staring at the most beautiful and impossible sight he'd ever witnessed. A woman was rising from the quantum pool like some fever dream born from too much interdimensional exposure. Her skin was a luminescent blue that seemed to capture and reflect the pool's otherworldly light, creating patterns that shifted across her body like living art. Her hair fell in waves of what looked like spun crystal, each strand catching light and throwing it back in prismatic rainbows. Delicate silver markings traced elegant curves along her arms, shoulders, and what he could see of her torso, pulsing with a soft inner light that matched the rhythm of the pool itself. She wore what could generously be called a swimsuit, though it seemed to be crafted from liquid metal that clung to her form, while somehow maintaining an air of regal dignity. Jewelry that looked like captured starlight adorned her throat and wrists, and when she turned to look at him with eyes the color of deep space, Marcus felt his ability to form coherent thoughts temporarily abandon him. Then she opened her mouth and destroyed any romantic notions he might have been developing. "You," she said, her voice carrying an accent that made every syllable sound like a royal proclamation being delivered by someone who was deeply, personally offended, "are contaminating my quantum sanctuary." Marcus blinked, his brain struggling to process the situation. A gorgeous alien woman had just materialized in his extremely expensive interdimensional spa experience, and her opening line was essentially a cosmic complaint about pool hygiene. "Excuse me?" he managed to croak, his voice embarrassingly hoarse. She rose fully from the quantum pool, somehow managing to look imperious despite being mostly naked and dripping with luminescent water. The patterns on her skin pulsed brighter, and Marcus realized they weren't tattoos or paint. They were some kind of natural bioluminescence that responded to her emotional state. "This quantum sanctuary belongs to the Veltar dynasty by ancient right," she declared, settling into the pool as if she owned it, which apparently she believed she did. "You are obviously the dimensional attendant assigned to maintain optimal quantum resonance." Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish experiencing its first encounter with atmosphere. Dimensional attendant? Lady, I paid 43,000 credits for this pool. 43,000. You want to share? You better have a reservation. Number and proof of payment. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in an expression of elegant confusion. Payment? Credits? You speak of primitive exchange concepts? Primitive? Marcus gestured around the quantum pool, which was currently displaying what looked like a light show choreographed by interdimensional physicists. I bought this experience, fair and square, from Nebula Springs Resort Incorporated. There's paperwork, contracts, legally binding agreements. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to something that might have been amusement, if it weren't so clearly condescending. You believe you have purchased what belongs to royalty by birthright? I believe I have a receipt. She laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes being played by a cosmic storm. How delightfully primitive. Tell me, dimensional attendant, what designation do you carry? It's Marcus, and I'm not a dimensional attendant. I'm a former quantum physicist who maxed out 3 credit cards for 2 weeks of interdimensional therapy. The quantum pool's energy was making him feel simultaneously relaxed and confrontational, which was probably not the intended therapeutic effect. And you're in my booked time slot. She tested his name like she was sampling wine that might be poisoned. Marcus, I am Princess Zara Veltar, 7th of her line, keeper of the quantum gates, daughter of the dimensional crown. She paused, clearly expecting some kind of reaction that involved bowing or possibly fainting with reverence. You may address me as your luminescence. I'll address you as someone who needs to check the booking system before claiming other people's vacation spots, Marcus replied, surprised by his own boldness. Maybe it was the quantum energy, or maybe it was 8 months of accumulated frustration finally finding a target. Zara's bioluminescent markings flared brighter, pulsing with what he was beginning to recognize as indignation. You dare speak to royalty with such casual disrespect? Princess, your luminescence, whatever. I've had a really terrible year, okay? The words started spilling out, powered by months of suppressed anger and the strange liberation that came from arguing with an interdimensional princess in a quantum pool. I lost my job because the government decided that understanding the fundamental nature of reality was less important than tax breaks for corporations. My fiancée decided she preferred dating someone with stability and emotional availability. Apparently, my 60-hour work weeks to advance human knowledge made me a poor romantic partner. And my landlord sold my apartment building to developers, who turned it into luxury condos I can't afford. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with recounting his recent disasters, but somehow, the quantum pool's energy seemed to absorb the worst of his emotional pain. So excuse me if I'm not ready to give up the one nice thing I've managed to pay for since my life decided to implode. Something flickered across Zara's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished quickly behind her mask of royal hauteur. Your personal misfortunes do not supersede ancient dimensional law. And your ancient dimensional law doesn't supersede galactic consumer protection statutes. They stared at each other across the shimmering water, and Marcus had to admit that even when she looked like she wanted to vaporize him with her mind, Zara was absolutely stunning. The way the quantum energy played across her blue skin, the elegant line of her neck, the way her markings pulsed in rhythm with what might have been her heartbeat. It was all very distracting from the fact that she was trying to steal his vacation. You will not yield, Zara said finally, her tone suggesting this was somehow surprising. Not a chance. Then we must resolve this according to ancient law. Her smile was sharp as a quantum blade and twice as dangerous. Marcus felt a chill despite the pool's warmth. What kind of ancient law? Disputed quantum rights must be settled through dimensional resonance trials. Zara's smile widened, showing teeth that were perfectly white with a faint, luminescent quality. Whoever can maintain the deepest quantum harmonization for the duration of one complete dimensional cycle wins sovereignty over the sanctuary. Dimensional resonance trials? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. What exactly does that mean? It means, Marcus, of the former quantum physicists, that we must remain in physical contact, until the dimensional barriers complete their full rotation. Her smile became predatory. The one who breaks contact first forfeits all claim to the quantum sanctuary. Marcus's brain short-circuited somewhere between physical contact and dimensional barriers. You want to have a touching contest to decide who gets to use the pool? If that is how your primitive understanding interprets ancient Veltar law, then yes. He looked around the quantum pool, trying to calculate dimensions and angles, while his mind reeled. The space was maybe 10 feet across, intimate by any standard, and she wanted them to stay in physical contact for... How long does a dimensional cycle take? Until the quantum barriers align with the primary dimensional matrix and the great convergence stabilizes. Marcus squinted at the strange geometric patterns shifting through the pool's depths, trying to judge their movement. They seemed to be in some kind of slow rotation, but estimating the speed was like trying to time the movement of concepts. That could be hours. Precisely. Zara moved closer through the water, her movements creating ripples of light. And you think you'll win because? Her expression turned predatory. Because I am Veltar royalty, trained from birth in dimensional harmonization techniques, and you are a soft human who has already admitted to a year of failure and weakness. That stung more than it should have. Marcus felt his jaw clench. Soft? Listen, your luminescence, I've pulled all-nighters debugging quantum equations that would make your royal brain melt. I've spent 18-hour days in containment suits working with exotic matter. I think I can handle a little interdimensional pool time with a princess who's too entitled to make a reservation. Zara's markings flared so bright they were visible, even against the pool's luminescence. Then you accept the dimensional resonance trial? Marcus looked at her, really looked. She was gorgeous, dangerous, and completely insane. She was also the most interesting thing that had happened to him in months, possibly years. And if he was being honest with himself, the prospect of spending hours in close contact with her wasn't exactly torture. You know what? Fine. But when I win, you're paying for half my vacation. When you lose, Zara purred, moving even closer through the shimmering water. You will acknowledge my sovereignty and provide proper dimensional attendance for the remainder of my stay. Deal. Marcus extended his hand. Should we shake on? Zara stared at his outstretched hand like it might contain explosive quantum particles. Is this some primitive human bonding ritual? It's called a handshake. It means we agree to the terms. She reached out tentatively and grasped his hand. Her skin was warm. Warmer than the quantum pool, warmer than seemed physically possible. The bioluminescent markings on her arm pulsed brighter where they touched, and Marcus felt a jolt of energy shoot up his arm like he'd grabbed a live wire made of pure possibility. The trial begins now, she said softly, but her voice had lost some of its imperial certainty. Marcus felt the quantum pool respond to their contact, the water around them beginning to pulse with complex patterns of light and energy. The dimensional barriers in the pool's depth seemed to slow their rotation, as if their joined hands had somehow affected the fundamental forces keeping this pocket of reality stable. What was that? He asked, still feeling electricity dancing along his nervous system. Dimensional resonance, Zara said quickly, but her eyes had widened in what looked like surprise. Perfectly normal when two biosignatures interface with quantum-stabilized matter. But her voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. They were still holding hands, and Marcus became acutely aware of how close she was sitting. Close enough to see flecks of silver in her deep space eyes. Close enough to catch a scent like ozone and something floral he couldn't identify. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin in waves that had nothing to do with the pool's temperature. So, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, what happens now? Zara's smile returned, but it looked less certain than before. Now, we wait and see who breaks first. Bring it on, your luminescence. The quantum pool pulsed with interdimensional energy. Geometric patterns shifted through depths that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, and Marcus Webb found himself locked in the most bizarre and potentially romantic contest of his life with an alien princess who might just be the most dangerous and attractive opponent he'd ever faced. The dimensional resonance trial had begun. The dimensional dilemma. The first hour of the dimensional resonance trial passed in tense silence, broken only by the gentle hum of quantum energy and the occasional shift of geometric patterns in the pool's depths. Marcus kept his hand locked, with Zara's, determined not to be the first to crack. Her skin remained impossibly warm, and those bioluminescent markings continued their hypnotic pulsing wherever they touched. "Your biosignature is unusual," Zara said finally, breaking the silence. Her imperial tone had softened slightly, curiosity bleeding through the royal composure. "Most species create dimensional interference when they contact quantum-stabilized matter." "Is that good or bad?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite their competition. "Most beings disrupt the harmonic frequencies. Their presence creates instability, chaos." She studied their joined hands with what might have been scientific interest. "Your quantum resonance actually enhances the pool's natural patterns." Marcus grinned. "Are you saying I'm naturally gifted at interdimensional physics, your luminescence?" Zara's markings flared brighter. "I am making an objective physiological observation." "Sure you are." But Marcus noticed she hadn't pulled her hand away despite having several opportunities to do so. "So what's a princess doing taking unauthorized pool baths anyway? Don't you have servants to test your quantum sanctuaries for proper dimensional alignment?" Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or fear. "Royal obligations do not always align with personal preferences." That's politician speak for, "It's complicated." Everything is complicated when you are born to rule. Zara's grip on his hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "You mentioned your own complications. Failed employment, failed relationships. Do you always abandon commitments when they become difficult?" Marcus felt his defensive wall slam up. "I didn't abandon anything. My job abandoned me. Budget restructuring, they called it. Turns out understanding the fundamental nature of reality isn't considered essential when politicians decide science costs too much." "And the female who preferred your former colleague?" "Rachel." The name tasted bitter, even after 8 months. 3 years together, and she decides she wants someone with better emotional availability and financial stability. Apparently working 70-hour weeks to advance human knowledge made me a poor romantic partner. Zara studied his face with uncomfortable intensity. "You blame others for your failures. I blame circumstances beyond my control," Marcus shot back, his voice sharpening. "Not everyone gets to be born into guaranteed success, your luminescence." "Guaranteed?" Zara's laugh held no humor. "You believe royalty guarantees success, doesn't it? Crown, subjects, quantum sanctuaries whenever you want them, and arranged marriages to brutal warlords for political alliance." The words slipped out before Zara could stop them, her composure cracking. "And bioenergy regulation requirements that make you dependent on specific dimensional frequencies, and the constant knowledge that your value lies entirely in your ability to produce heirs with the correct genetic compatibility." Marcus stared at her. The mask of imperial arrogance had slipped, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "That's why you're here. You're running away." "I am not running," but her voice lacked conviction. "I am postponing inevitable political necessities." "What kind of political necessities?" Zara's markings dimmed slightly. "Marriage to Commander, Fextorn of the Dimensional Fleet, a union that will secure military alliance between our systems and prevent a war that would cost billions of lives." Sounds romantic. Vex collects royal wives like trophies. His previous 4 consorts died under mysterious circumstances involving training accidents and unfortunate dimensional rifts. Zara's grip on Marcus's hand had become almost painful. "But the alliance is crucial for my people's survival." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a familiar ache he recognized from his own trapped circumstances. "So you're sacrificing yourself for everyone else?" "It is my duty." "Duty's a hell of a thing," Marcus said, squeezing her hand gently. "I used to think duty meant working myself to death for a research program that treated me like expendable equipment. Took me losing everything to realize that maybe duty should work both ways." They sat in contemplative silence as the dimensional Barriers continued their slow rotation through the pool's depths. The quantum energy had grown more intense, and Marcus could feel it resonating in his bones like a tuning fork struck by the universe itself. Zara, however, seemed to be drawing strength from the dimensional frequencies rather than being drained by them. "Your species adapts quickly to quantum exposure," she observed. "We're stubborn that way. Evolution's way of making sure we survive, even when we probably shouldn't." Marcus shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position without breaking contact. The movement brought them closer together, and he caught that ozone and flowers scent again. "Though I'm starting to think maybe survival isn't the only thing worth fighting for." Zara's eyes snapped to his. "What do you mean?" "Maybe sometimes you fight for something because it matters, not because you have to." Before Zara could respond, her markings suddenly blazed like warning beacons. She jerked upright, her head tilted as if listening to something Marcus couldn't hear. "What is it?" he asked. "Dimensional trackers." Her voice was tight with panic. "They have locked onto my quantum signature." "Who's they?" "Royal Guard. Vex's advanced scouts." Zara started to pull away, then stopped, her eyes widening in horror. "Oh no, this cannot be happening." "What?" "The barriers." She pointed to where the geometric patterns in the pool's depths were beginning to align in complex formations. "They are approaching convergence." Marcus looked at the shifting patterns, then back at Zara's panicked face. "So, according to ancient, Feltar dimensional law, any individual who shares quantum space with a member of the royal family during a complete barrier convergence becomes their bonded mate." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The ceremony is considered complete when the great convergence stabilizes." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water despite the pool's warmth. "Bonded mate? As in, married? Permanently, with full legal standing in both our dimensional matrices. And when does this convergence happen?" Zara pointed to the pool's depths, where the geometric patterns were rotating faster, drawing closer to some kind of alignment. "Approximately 20 minutes. Fuck. Indeed. Marcus's mind raced through the implications. "Okay, so we break contact now. Problem solved." "No." Zara's grip tightened desperately. "If I leave the quantum pool now, the dimensional trackers will lock onto my signature immediately. Without quantum regulation, my bioenergy will spike and broadcast my location across half the galaxy. And if we stay, then in 20 minutes you become my husband according to laws that supersede both our governments." Marcus stared at her, then at the converging patterns, then back at her terrified face. "There's got to be a loophole. Veltar law is absolute. Quantum bonding ceremonies cannot be reversed or annulled. What about human law? I'm a Terran citizen. Interspecies. Matrimonial agreements supersede planetary jurisdiction. It is part of the Galactic Trade Accords your government signed in 2387. Marcus's head spun. "So either we break up now and you get dragged back to marry Captain Psychopath, or we stay together and accidentally get married ourselves." That is an accurate, if crude, summary. The geometric patterns in the pool rotated faster, and Marcus could see dark shapes moving in the distance. Figures in what looked like advanced armor approaching across the resort's crystalline landscape. "How long before the trackers get here?" "Perhaps 10 minutes. "And how long before we're legally married?" 15 minutes. "So we've got a 5-minute window where we're married, but they haven't arrived yet to arrest me for it." Zara nodded miserably. "Upon which they will be legally required to either accept you as prince consort or execute you for unlawful quantum bonding with royalty." Great options. Marcus watched the approaching figures, his mind churning through possibilities. What are the odds they'll choose option 1? Vex has never been known for his diplomatic solutions. The quantum pool beneath them pulsed with increasing intensity, responding to their elevated stress levels. Marcus realized his heart was hammering against his ribs, and not just from the approaching danger. Somewhere in the last few hours, Zara had stopped being just a beautiful alien princess and had become someone he genuinely didn't want to lose. "Zara," he said quietly. "Yes?" "For what it's worth, if I had to accidentally marry someone, you wouldn't be the worst choice." Her bioluminescent markings flared brighter than he'd yet seen them. That is perhaps the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Really? That's the bar for royal romance? Most of my courtship has involved military demonstrations and genetic compatibility reports. Jesus. Marcus squeezed her hand. No wonder you ran away. The geometric patterns were now rotating so fast. They were becoming a blur, and the quantum energy around them was building to levels that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The approaching figures were close enough that Marcus could make out individual shapes. Tall, armored forms moving, with military precision. Marcus, Zara said, her voice barely audible above the humming quantum field. Yeah? I want you to know that if circumstances were different, if I were not who I am, if you were not who you are, this would not be the worst fate imaginable. Marcus felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in his chest. Princess, are you saying you like me? I am saying that your quantum compatibility is remarkable. Your irreverent attitude is refreshing, and your willingness to argue with royalty suggests a courage that most of my previous suitors have lacked. Most? All? All. The convergence was almost complete. Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation wherever his skin touched Zara's, as if some kind of energy was building between them. The quantum pool was now blazing with light and strange harmonics were building in the air around them. Is something supposed to happen? He asked. Zara's eyes were wide with wonder and terror. The bonding energy. It is beginning. The tingling, intensified, spreading up Marcus's arm and across his chest. Zara's markings were now blazing like stars, and he could swear he felt an echo of her heartbeat in his own pulse. Marcus, she whispered. Yeah? I think I am falling in love with you. Before Marcus could respond, the quantum pool around them erupted in a shower of crystalline light. Armed figures materialized at the pool's edge, not approaching across the resort, but stepping directly out of dimensional rifts that opened like tears in reality itself. Weapons that looked like they could unmake matter at the molecular level were trained on Marcus's head. At their center stood a figure in elaborate armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that came from never being questioned. Princess Zara, the figure said, you will come with us now. Zara's grip on Marcus's hand became desperate. Commander Vex, the armored figure turned his attention to Marcus, and even through the helmet's faceplate, Marcus could feel the weight of predatory intelligence studying him. And this pathetic human will die for his presumption. Marcus looked up at the weapons, pointed at his head, then at Zara's terrified face, then at the geometric patterns that were seconds away from complete alignment. The bonding energy was still building between them, making his skin feel like it was on fire in the most incredible way possible. Actually, he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded, I think you might want to check your legal database before you start the execution. Vex's helmet tilted slightly. What? Marcus raised his joined hand with Zara's, letting the blazing quantum energy catch the light. The pool around them was now pulsing with harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions he couldn't see. Because, unless I'm mistaken, you're about to commit regicide by murdering a prince consort. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Vex's weapon powered up with a sound like reality being torn apart. Then I will make it a double execution. But as the words left his mouth, the geometric patterns in the pool's depths suddenly snapped into perfect alignment. The quantum energy that had been building around Marcus and Zara suddenly blazed outward like a supernova, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift in the fabric of space-time itself. The pool wasn't just responding to their bonding ceremony. It was activating something. Something that had been waiting for the right combination of quantum signatures and dimensional harmonics. What the hell? Marcus breathed, as streams of light began shooting outward from their position, connecting to similar installations across the resort, across the planet, across distances that his mind couldn't quite process. Zara's eyes were wide with wonder and terror. The ancient network. Marcus, what have we done? Information began flooding into Marcus's consciousness, not through his ears or eyes, but directly into his mind, as if the quantum field itself was downloading data into his brain. Dimensional gates, quantum highways, An empire that spanned multiple realities, all controlled from nexus points like this one. And according to the data streaming through his awareness, he had just become its emperor. "Vex," he said, turning to face the armored commander with a grin that felt dangerous. "I think we need to renegotiate." The quantum pool blazed with interdimensional fire. Reality bent around their joined hands, and Marcus Webb discovered that sometimes the universe had plans that were far more interesting than anything he could have imagined. His relaxing spa vacation had just become a fight for an interdimensional empire, with the woman he was falling in love with as his co-ruler and a psychotic warlord as their first diplomatic challenge. It was definitely going to be more interesting than unemployment.